Hello, everyone. Welcome to another webinar presentation by the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. My name is Jack Hanna, former treasurer and interim chair of the Democratic State Committee of Pennsylvania, and your host today. The topic for today's conversation and presentation is Build Back Better. And again, we have an excellent panel for you to discuss and describe these themes. The United States of America is in a crisis. No, several crises. They include a pandemic, an economic circumstance not faced since the Great Depression. And it is also a crisis of addressing its severely eroded national infrastructure that has been ignored since the 1960s. And we are going to start today by showing you the consequence of what can happen when we fail to address this critical national economic issue. Some of you may have already heard of the Brent Spence Bridge in Cincinnati, Ohio. Regardless, here is a news report we wish to share with you so we may start with a particular focus on what challenges and what needs we face today in addressing America's eroded national infrastructure. Thank you.
A terrible accident that raises real concerns on safety with the bridge as it is right now.
A ball of flames erupts on the Brent Spence Bridge after a crash. The light of day revealing the extent of the damage to both the lower and upper decks. Someone said it looks like a missile struck the bridge. Questions about the safety mean we could be living with a traffic nightmare for some time.
So this is a situation and circumstance that just arose over the last few days. It is going to be a topic that some of our panelists will be discussing today and describe how significant of an impact economically this kind of a problem will be affecting the entire nation, and how the failure of major infrastructure entities that we have throughout the country are failing. We also have a presenter who I'm not sure has joined us yet, Kate Schroder, who was the Democratic candidate for Congress in Ohio's District 1, which includes Cincinnati, and is very familiar with the bridge as one of her district's important economic and financial lifelines to the city and to the geographic area, and for that matter, the country. If we could have Kate join us, that would be wonderful.
Here, Jack.
Okay, great. Then take it away, Kate. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. I am grateful for the opportunity to be here. As Jack mentioned, I was the recent Democratic nominee for Congress here in the 1st District of Ohio, which is the southwest part around Cincinnati. So I am very familiar with the Brent Spence Bridge that we just saw a bit about. And I want to talk about that in the priority of infrastructure investment here. So I'm actually from a 5th generation Cincinnati family. The Brent Spence Bridge connects Ohio to Kentucky. 71 and 75 go over it. It has been functionally obsolete since the 90s. For anyone who's driven across the bridge, it is obsolete because the lanes are so narrow and there are no shoulders to it. So there's no emergency lanes on the side. And as a mother of a 5- and 7-year-old, I can tell you that I try to avoid going across the bridge at all costs with my kids in the car. And you always are checking, looking around you to see how many semis are on there when you're about to enter it. And I've actually spoken to engineers who've inspected it and refused to drive across. And this has been a priority for our region to address for many, many years. There's a tremendous amount of frustration here, particularly since, for a while we had Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, we had John Boehner just north of here in Ohio. And you had so many presidents, Obama, Trump, many that have talked about the importance of infrastructure, and yet here we are with no progress on it. And then that horrific accident happened at 2:45 a.m. last week, and my goodness, we were so lucky it was in the morning and not in the after 2:45 in the afternoon, because it's a miracle that there were no deaths with that. The bridge has now been closed. Since then, it will be closed through at least December 23rd, and it is causing massive disruptions in this area. I mean, there are over 173,000 vehicles that go over that bridge every day. It was only built for 80,000. And there's $1 billion in goods trade that go across the bridge every day, over 400 billion a year. It is so vital, not to just the economy of this region, but the economy of the entire corridor from Miami up to Detroit. And so it's really a priority. I think that we have an opportunity. My background, I actually have an MBA and spent my career in public health. We obviously have an economic recession that has been the result of the pandemic that we are going through. And I think we have a real opportunity as part of Build Back Better plan to focus on infrastructure. This is not Democrat, this is not Republican, this is a nonpartisan issue that we all need to come together around. And I think, like we learned from the Great Depression and the New Deal coming out of it, we have a unique opportunity to invest in infrastructure. It creates so many well-paying union jobs, and it also leaves tangible benefits for decades to come. And so I am going to continue to be a champion on this here. I am thrilled to be part of the conversation tonight and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that presentation. We're so pleased to have you, and wish you the best with your work going forward. I'm going to next introduce our panelist, Bob Lynn, Secretary of the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank, and also with Jobs with Justice, and with the UA Local 50 from Toledo, Ohio. Bob, please feel free to make your presentation now. Happy to have you join us.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to speak to the group here. This is a very important event that just happened here that we were just talking about, the Brent Spence Bridge, which was named after the congressman and actually built in 1963. As Kate pointed out so eloquently, the bridge was designed to carry 80,000 people, and today it carries 173,000, and they say within the next decade it could carry as much as 200,000 vehicles across that every single day. The real challenge when it comes to the bridge is that it merges two main arteries that go one from Cleveland and the other from Detroit and points north. So Detroit, Toledo, down into Dayton, all goes into Cincinnati, and then it goes Columbus, it goes Cleveland, Columbus, all that pours into Cincinnati. Right now, 3%, they estimate 3% of the nation's GDP goes across that bridge. That is a tremendous amount of traffic that goes across and a tremendous amount of commerce that goes across. Now, obviously, as this bridge is closed down, the region sees a slowdown because obviously they have to go and figure out other alternates or other alternatives to be able to get across the river. One of them is actually a bridge that was built in 1866, a suspension bridge that all the trucks were headed to, and they actually had to close that because too much truck traffic was on it, and the bridge is incapable of being able to handle that. Because of the 173,000 vehicles that go across it every day, 30,000 are heavy trucks that go across that bridge. And so they've taken a bridge that was designed 3 lanes in each direction, and what they've done is made it 4 lanes in each direction, and it's really put a strain on that. I know I have been on that bridge different times of the day, several times as I've gone from points north to points south. And it has always been an interesting and sometimes challenging endeavor to get across that bridge. But the bridge is just one example here in Ohio about the need to be able to actually address the infrastructure needs in this country. It should really bring home the point that it doesn't matter if you have the most powerful senator, Mitch McConnell, because he hasn't been able to get the bridge done. You had the Speaker of the House, Mr. Boehner, who knows that bridge very well, and they still could not get the funding in place to be able to make that bridge happen, to be able to do it. They're always pointing fingers. It's Ohio's fault, it's Indiana's fault, it's Kentucky's fault. There's no doubt there's plenty of blame to go around. But one of the things we have to be able to do as we're looking forward in this infrastructure is we need to take the politics out of it. You shouldn't have to have the most powerful senator to be able to get financing for your project. You shouldn't have to have the Speaker of the House in your region to be able to get the financing necessary to be able to actually get the infrastructure needs of your country or your county, your local municipality. Those are the things that should be done as a country. America has to start to prioritize the infrastructure needs in order to be able to move things forward. We can't, it should not matter. The infrastructure needs in this country should not matter who's president and who's in control of the House or who's in control of the Senate. If we continue to go down that path, which is the pay-as-you-go system that we currently are operating under, we will never accomplish and we will never meet the expectations that we have to be able to actually make our economy as great as it could be again. Right now, China uses 8% of their GDP in order to be able to generate the infrastructure needs that they have. In Europe, it's 5.5% of their GDP is invested in infrastructure, and in the United States, it's 2.5%. That's not enough money to be able to do it. And the bank that we're talking about here, where we're talking $4 to $5 trillion, is the amount of investment that needs to happen. Now, everyone on this webinar can look around in their neighborhood and they can see something that needs to be done. It might not be the Brent Spence Bridge, but there's a huge amount of infrastructure that needs to be addressed. And those are the things at the end of the day that we need to make sure that we go out and say, we want this piece of infrastructure invested in. And we have to be able to do that. And that's what this is all about. So I encourage everyone, if you haven't gotten involved in this, please visit our website, get involved, and try to talk to your local city council, your local commissioners, whatever you have, wherever you have a sphere of influence. Reach out to your people in Congress and insist that the infrastructure that you see, the infrastructure needs in your community get addressed. And at the end of the day, that's what this bank has the potential to take it out of the political realm and actually start to make it America first, which is what we need to do. With that, thank you very much. Have a great webinar.
Thank you, Bob. Let me just back up a moment and refer our viewers to the legislation that has been created and filed with Congress, HR 6422, sponsored by Congressman Danny Davis from Illinois, along with several co-sponsors. This piece of legislation creates a national infrastructure bank modeled after the first one that was created by Alexander Hamilton, and then one that was also employed by Abraham Lincoln during his term in administration, and finally FDR during the Great Depression, which helped finance the creation and construction of the infrastructure, most of which we see today and has not been updated. Senator DiPalma from Rhode Island, who is a state senator and wishes to initiate our conversation regarding this very important topic. Senator DiPalma, you have the floor. Thank you.
Jack, thank you very much for that. Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to be a part of tonight's panel. While you just saw an incident with regarding a bridge, I'll be talking about a different topic equally important. It is critical we build back best, especially as it relates to our ever-aging infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I'm talking about infrastructure in the largest definition of the term. President-elect Biden's Build Back Better platform regarding infrastructure is as follows. And this comes directly from the Biden plan to build a modern, sustainable infrastructure and equitable clean energy future, which you can find at joebiden.com. And let me read it exactly word for word. Infrastructure, create millions of good union jobs, rebuilding America's crumbling infrastructure, from roads and bridges to green spaces and water systems to electricity grids and universal broadband. My next few minutes, I will focus on the electric grid and what needs to happen there. Our ever-aging infrastructure goes back some 100 years, as some might imagine. Virtually the entirety of our aged electric grid was built and designed to deliver energy to customers' homes and businesses. Our electric grid was not designed to have power generated by consumers and the excess returned back to the grid. And clearly upgrades are needed now more than ever. Equally important is the security of our grid, those which currently exist, and especially the expected enhanced smart grids of the future. Ensuring our grid is cyber secure is paramount. I cannot emphasize that enough. The upgraded electric grid will bolster and buttress many of the infrastructure investments we will be discussing tonight. I look forward to continuing to work with this very august group, and I believe you'll believe that's true when you hear them, and all those listening and want to be a part of our future infrastructure upgrade. And as an engineer, I consider this, in addition to being a senator, I consider this to be exciting stuff. I hope you do as well. Jack, back to you.
Our next panelist is going to describe how actually that bank works and what the financial mechanisms are to create it and have it be used. Alphecca Muttardy is a macroeconomist who's next in line to speak to you today. And we welcome you, Alphecca, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jack. Welcome to all of you who've come to listen to various speakers tell you something about our National Infrastructure Bank proposal. I'm a macroeconomist with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank, and my sort of area of expertise is to know all the special nuances and particular parts of HR 6422 and how it works. We've got some other descriptions of how it works up on our webinar, in webinars up on our website, nibcoalition.com, and also some descriptive papers. But what I'd like to do today is to describe how this bill in its particular parts can build back best. That is, it'll be a better policy option than any other policy option, both to completely fix all of our infrastructure and to rebuild our economy. So the first thing I'd like to say is that this bill, currently at $4 trillion and probably to be expanded to $5 trillion, the beauty of the bill is that what we've done is to start with the question, how much do we need? And then how much is being spent on the ordinary authorization mechanisms, and how much is the financing gap? That financing gap includes things like the Brent Spence Bridge, other big critical projects across the United States, and then long-term infrastructure development over the next 10 or 20 years. And that's the part that this bank will be financing. The way to build back our infrastructure best is to have adequate financing from the start to do the projects well, to design the projects well, and to design them completely. And that's what this bank will do. So we've been very careful to come up to coordinate with the American Society of Civil Engineers on what this financing gap is, and then to provide provisions within the bill to cover all of it in every single district in the United States. So we will cover the financing gap, and then in the short term, we have these critical projects that we need to build. Brent Spence is just one example of a bridge that's been declared to be structurally inefficient and needing replacement. Another example is the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. There's quite a few number of other bridges all across the United States. And when you look at these critical bridges that are on economic corridors, as other speakers have described, if we don't fix them and then there's a catastrophic failure, then our GDP or how much we can produce in our country and how much we can earn in our country actually goes backwards. We lose GDP and we lose jobs as well. So that's why it's critical to address first, and the day that the doors of the National Infrastructure Bank open, to address first these critical projects. And bridges that are in need of replacement are definitely one of the categories that we need to address first. A second large category is to have safe drinking water. We have lead in a lot of our drinking water. For example, now the city that is the most prone to having drinking water problems and lead problems is Chicago. Actually has overtaken Flint and Newark, New Jersey, to have probably the rating of the worst drinking water in the United States for this reason. So we definitely need to work on drinking water and safe water systems in our country. Highways that are causing a lot of traffic accidents, like Highway 1 that goes along the Florida Keys, the most dangerous highway in America. We need to address that. The Hudson River Tunnel, which was built in 1910 with cast iron tubes and is in danger of collapsing. And if that one collapses, there's hundreds of thousands of people that go through that tunnel every day, commuting between New York and New Jersey. It's along another major economic corridor. If we were to lose that means of going through a catastrophic failure, that's where 20% of America's GDP is produced. And so that would also be catastrophic for our economy. So all of these projects that we have identified that will cause our economy to go backwards if we don't fix them, they'll be first on our list to fix. In addition, now it's the case that because of the COVID downturn in the economy, that a lot of state and local and utility finances have really gone negative because of the economic downturn. And not only, these would be our major borrowers from the National Infrastructure Bank to do new capital projects. So we want to be able to help them as quickly as possible by shoring up their resources to build new capital projects. And in addition, if they're having even problems with their operating expenses, this is very much the case for transit authorities, for example, who we want to bolster their capacity and their capital development for the transit authorities. New York is a case in point. The New York metro system today is in huge financial disarray because of the shutdown. It may be the case that they have to lay off in the coming short period of time up to 25% of their workers. This is an area where we think that the National Infrastructure Bank can really help, because it can come in and help these transit authorities with their finances to stabilize their workforce and payroll, and at the same time to, if their business is down because we're still in COVID sequestration and there's not too much going on in transportation, not too many riders in the trains, then we can use this opportunity to actually do capital projects, which will bolster those authorities' finances. And those would be the kinds of things that we would move up very first to help state and local governments. It's the case that every year this bank will be investing in infrastructure, and those projects will be hiring millions of new workers to complete these infrastructure projects, that will be taking people off of unemployment rolls and putting them, even in the short term and in the long term, into great paying jobs. And that will be the very first and fastest way to improve the finances of state and local governments and transit authorities. So that's the second way that the National Infrastructure Bank will build back best, by prioritizing from the get-go. And then we want to focus on projects that maximize economic growth. On the slide that you were just looking at, there's a picture, for example, of the potential high-speed rail project around Chicago, Illinois. That is a major transportation hub for the whole Northwest region. And by building pieces of high-speed rail along those economic corridors, we can really supercharge economic growth along the corridors and accelerate economic activity along them. Andy Coons and Dr. Metcalf are going to talk to you a little bit more about some of those ideas for high-speed rail. We're going to also finance projects overall that will hire up to 25 million new workers at family-sustaining wages with their own health care benefits. And those projects will also, that's to directly build the infrastructure that we need, and as well to have secondary growth in our economy for manufacturing and businesses that result from the infrastructure development. So an example of something that's contained in the bill, for example, is the feature that we will buy America only for our infrastructure investment. That should go a long way to promoting fabrication and manufacturing to build these new projects out. We will also use the latest technologies for efficiency and energy savings that's called for in the bill. We will enhance education to train workers in needed fields. An example of how this can actually work in practice is any unions that have helmets to hard hat programs, that have programs to train apprentices just coming out of high school or two-year colleges for specific technical fields. And then also a great example is the City of Los Angeles Economic and Workforce Development Department, which lines up all the workers that we need. They go and ask at businesses, and they'll ask at new construction sites, and then they'll go back and then do the hiring of private schools to train all of these workers. But when you line them up in a consistent way and say, we need this infrastructure, we need this workforce, and we have these places to train them all, then you have the very best, you're building back your workforce in the very best ways as well.
Becca, we will come back to you. I'm just concerned a bit about the other presenters having time. So
yeah, I'm pretty much done. Thank you. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Alphecca. And while you prompted that, let me again emphasize or reiterate, there is a Q&A mechanism with the webinar that we have today. We encourage those of you that have any questions regarding our panelists to employ it, and we will review the questions, and after the presentations have been made, ask the questions of several of our panelists. We're going to go on to our next presenter, who is Dr. Alexander Metcalf, high-speed rail economics expert of TEMS Incorporated, being its president. And we welcome you, Doctor, to our program and look forward to your presentation. Take it away.
Thank you very much. If I may have my first slide. Okay, so that's just the title, which is Build Back Best. And what I'm going to try and to talk to you today about is how we need to build back best with respect to some of the infrastructure that we already have. Can I have the next slide? In the last presentation I made to you, I described the national high-speed rail network that it would be possible to build over the next 20 years and the impact that would have in terms of adding something between about 0.5 and 1% to GDP with all the associated jobs and economic benefits that flow from that. This network has arisen because basically the conditions and the opportunities for high-speed rail have improved dramatically over the last 40 years, and we can see 4 distinct phases of development. Today, I just want to talk about one of those phases, the Northeast Corridor. The Northeast Corridor is one of the key growth sectors of the US economy, and yet it's facing a lot of significant traffic growth of over 35% and increasing congestion along the corridor. So as a result, there is a need for new infrastructure, and one of those infrastructures could indeed be a true high-speed rail network. Next slide. The existing rail system between New York and Washington was, as most of you know, was built between the 1850 and 1920, and as a result, is an extremely twisty and curvy corridor. This is not really the kind of corridor that you need for the new high-speed trains that are capable of 220 miles an hour if, in fact, you give them an appropriate alignment. Today, we've already spending $2 billion on buying new trains that are capable of 220 miles an hour, and yet we're only going to run them at something around 150, 160 miles an hour. It's like buying a Ferrari and then driving it down a country lane. You're certainly not going to see the performance that you might expect. Next slide. So we need a track that has basically the ability to have in it only 15-minute curves. The current track has 2-degree, 3-degree curves in it, and makes the trains very, very slow. Next slide. If we build that right of way, then basically we are going to halve the total time it would take to go from Washington to New York. The current Amtrak timetable is over 2 3/4 hours, and we can reduce that to under 1.5 if we build the new alignment and allow the new Ferraris that Amtrak are buying to actually run at full speed. Next slide. Well, if we do that, what is going to be the cost of building that track? Essentially, the capital cost estimate is about $35 billion, which is a lot of money and scares a lot of government people. Essentially, what we're saying is we spent $2 billion on new Ferrari trains, but we need to spend another $33 billion on building a brand new track that will allow them to perform as efficiently as they should. So how are we going to pay back that $33 billion? Next slide. Essentially, there's 3 markets that we should be going after. One, the passenger market. If in fact we were to reduce the timetable to 1.5 hours, we would probably triple the passenger market. And of course, we would generate a significant increase in revenues by doing that. Next slide. The second market that we should be going after is parcels and light freight. The e-commerce market is expanding at 15% a year, and the major players in the field, FedEx, UPS, Amazon, and the trucking companies like XPO, need to have the infrastructure doubled in less than every 10 years. This is a real growth that's going on, and it's a part of the new economy where logistics is supporting the growth of the finance and administrative services sector of the US economy, which is a very substantial part of how we create new jobs and we create a higher standard of living. Next slide. Sorry, you've jumped a slide. Another basic market that we should be going after is real estate. Whenever you build a high-speed rail system, you should be developing the real estate at the major terminals. This is a picture of King's Cross in London, where 150-mile-an-hour service between London and Edinburgh was put in place. As a result, they are developing over 40 acres with over 25 new office blocks, 2,000 houses, and a complete redevelopment of the whole area around it. For California high-speed rail, a similar thing is already happening. The Trans-Bay Terminal is over 40 acres with a 7-acre park put on the roof of one of the office buildings that they're actually building. Next slide. If we do that, we find that essentially, instead of having a subsidized system, we can actually make a profit on the system. But we need that capital investment in order to do that. So we can generate significant cash flow if, in fact, we're able to go to an infrastructure bank or set up a PPP that will allow us to generate that income that will basically support the capital investment that we so badly need to have the best infrastructure between New York and Washington that we really need. Next slide. The impact of this is to generate a massive economic development. We've talked about adding between 0.5 and 1% to GDP per year to the American economy. For years, we've been complaining that we can't get back to 3 or 4% growth per year and are trundling along at 2%. One way to get to 3 or 4% would be to make the kind of investment that we're talking about. We would generate over $90 billion of economic development for the corridor between New York and Washington if we were to straighten the alignment and basically allow the Ferraris that we've already bought and have got in the garage and allow them to run as efficiently as they could at 220 miles an hour. Next slide. So what we're saying is building back better, building back best requires us to considerably upgrade the infrastructure in the Northeast Corridor, to spend $33 billion on straightening the track, and that with an infrastructure bank and public-private partnerships, we could actually raise the economy and create the jobs and economic development and income that we're so anxious to provide to the U.S. economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation, which we greatly appreciate. And I believe now, at long last, we are very happy and pleased that we're able to have Assemblyman Robert Garabinchak from New Jersey make his presentation. And welcome, Robert. We're very pleased to have you join us.
Jack, I have to apologize to everybody for the issues that I've been having here. I really apologize to everybody. And first of all, thank you, Jack, and the NIBA Coalition for having me tonight. And I am absolutely pleased to be in here. I'm the Assemblyman Rob Garabinchak in the 18th District in New Jersey, dead center of the state of New Jersey. I am also the chair of the Special Committee for Infrastructure and Natural Resources for the state of New Jersey, and the vice chair of Commerce and Economic Development for the state of New Jersey. I'm also proud to be a sponsor on AR 115, which supports HR 6422 for the National Infrastructure Bank. Obviously, the NIB will generate tens of thousands of jobs in New Jersey by expanding some of the oldest infrastructure in our nation. The most important thing here, with everybody speaking, this is to create and improve the lives of everybody that lives in our great country. And this is, in my opinion, is an investment in our future for all of our young adults or young kids and everybody in the future. Some of the projects that were talked about, which is critical and important that New Jersey and New York is looking at, is the Gateway program. As was stated, this is one of the most important pieces in this region. this 10-mile corridor would replace and update this old infrastructure and gives us additional tunnels to go between New Jersey and New York under the Hudson. Currently, we carry over 200,000 people a day. This will help increase that. This will help increase our trade and our economy. And right now, this will help contribute over $3 trillion annually to the U.S. economy. The benefit for every dollar spent to put this tunnels in will be over $2.16 coming back to the economic output between our two states. This was so important. Unfortunately, in history, it was stopped, it was started, it was stopped. And I believe that it should be started because otherwise we would have been driving through the tunnels today. The other items that were spoke about that we are focused on here in New Jersey was our drinking water. That's imperative for everyone, not just New Jersey, but everyone in our great country again. We have started in Newark, New Jersey, where we had some of the worst lead line services in our state. That replacement has started. And we're looking to expand that, not just in Newark, but all across our state. And obviously what was spoken about was across the whole country where we have these issues. Every single person that lives in this country deserves good, quality, clean water. That's imperative. Some of the other items that we are looking at is obviously what the doctor just spoke about, rapid transit. High-speed rails between Washington, D.C. and Newark. That will just change so much of our economy, our productivity, our competitiveness. Plus, it'll run on clean electric energy. Leading into one of New Jersey's biggest undertakings is our Ocean Wind Project. Currently, we have an ocean wind project that is 1.1 gigawatts offshore wind that is just off the coast of Atlantic City. This is the first utility scale offshore wind farm, obviously in New Jersey, and one of the biggest facilities in the US. This is expected to generate enough clean energy for over 500,000 households. And this is something that will be expanded. This is the first phase. There will be a second phase that we're looking at. Beyond that, we're looking at flood barriers. Seems a little odd that we're talking about flood barriers in New Jersey. However, with what we're seeing with climate change, more storms, heavier rains, rising sea levels, we are seeing floods in places where we never saw them before. We're seeing stormwater runoff that is creating floods in different areas. So we're looking into our infrastructure for bulkheads, flood walls, sea walls, controlling some of our stormwater, slowing it down, creating basins, retention basins, swales, things to slow down and capture stormwater so we don't have floods in our inner cities or everywhere else. These are some of the items that we're focused on, and we're looking to be a part of this National Infrastructure Bank, part of expanding whatever knowledge we grow here to expand it across the country here. Obviously, HR 6422 is now $4 trillion. I loved hearing our speaker just before this saying it's going to be expanded to $5 trillion. I'm one of those optimists that believe that this is going to happen. And these finances to fix our infrastructure across the whole state of America is so important. Beyond fixing all of this, jobs that's going to create, the financial and economic results of this are right now undeterminable that I could see. And all for the good of our country and for every single person that lives here. This will change their quality of life. This will change our country and our future. And I can't be more proud to be a part of this and to push every way I possibly can as a legislator in New Jersey. I've already made phone calls to our senators in Washington, our congressmen in New Jersey to talk about this in Washington. And anybody else that I could speak to, I'd be happy to. Again, I believe this is so, so important. So Jack, thank you. And thank you everybody else who's spoken before me and everybody after me. And I'd be absolutely willing to take any questions that anybody has for me. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Assemblyman Karabinchak, and we really appreciate your presentation here today. Next, I'm going to introduce one of my Pennsylvania compatriots, having been a former resident there for most of my life, near the Pittsburgh area. We're very pleased and happy to have with us tonight County Councilwoman Anita Prizio, who has some comments to make about infrastructure that we're anxious to hear. Anita, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Greetings from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a member of Allegheny County Council, and it's an honor and a privilege to participate on this panel. We are primed to bring back BEST. Although meds and eds have become an important part of Pittsburgh, steel still runs through our veins, and the prospect of creating family-sustaining jobs, as foreshadowed by the Keystone East-West high-speed rail study, is very exciting to us. I've been hearing from my constituents and elected officials that how long it takes for someone to go from Pittsburgh to Harrisburg. And I know that the Keystone East offers high-speed electrified passenger rail service from Harrisburg to Philadelphia, but we should also have this on the western part of the state. Not only, I mean, there's a lot of economic development that can come about by this connection. Admittedly, the topography is a little bit challenging in Western Pennsylvania. We have a lot of curves, and it would require some straightening and electrifying the passenger rail service, but I think it will serve its purpose. Less cars will be on the road, so our environmental impact will be less. And also it would open up Pittsburgh to more educational opportunities, job opportunities, travel opportunities. Pittsburgh ranks 4th overall to the most distressed infrastructure of all the states. And that's a combination of our poor roads, our deficient bridges, and our substandard dams. So we're really trying to find some other infrastructure things that might work for us. I mean, as people have mentioned, affordable broadband is so important. You know, if we really are interested in reshoring industries and Buy America and bringing the supply chains back, it's so important that we have affordable and resilient broadband, because if we really want to, especially Carnegie Mellon does a lot with additive manufacturing, with the Internet of Things, with all sorts of robotics, AI, we really require a strong broadband, and that's something that's lacking in some of the areas in Pennsylvania, especially in the Western District and West Virginia and some other areas. on a purely personal with our county, we are having some issues balancing our budget. COVID has really wreaked havoc on our budget. And when we talk about Port Authority, our transit authority, you know, they have all plans for expanding our busways and acquiring more electric buses. But because we don't really have the money, and that's why an infrastructure bank would be a godsend to finance some of these projects, to expand our busways and address some of the other issues. I mean, as everyone else, lead in the water is a big issue. I mean, we have an aging housing stock, and our pipelines are lead pipes, and that lead leaches into our drinking water. So those are all very important things. Stormwater is a big issue. I mean, with climate change, we have a lot of issues as far as our roads buckling, and we have combined source, so the stormwater and the sewage go into the same overflows. And here's a good example of, one of the buses that ran into one of our sinkhole. This happened in 2019. So, you know, we really do need to repair our roads. So therefore, I strongly endorse HR 6422 and the National Infrastructure Bank to finance all these projects in my district, and all of America. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. Great to have you join us. Our next presenter is going to talk more in detail about a national high-speed rail system. And we're very pleased and honored to have our next presenter be Andy Kuntz, President of U.S. High Speed Rail Association. Andy, you have the floor, and a pleasure to have you join us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. You have my slides. I'm happy to be here, happy to be supporting the bank and to be looking at a modern new transportation system for the country. Next slide. We started the association in 2009 with the express mission to build widespread public, business, and political support for a national high-speed rail system. And we launched this map that you see on your screen now as a way to get started and put the big vision out there and show everybody how the whole country can be connected up and how we can break this down into phases and build it piece by piece over the years until we get it complete. Next, please. And so our idea was always to not only think big, but to think about a complete transportation system. And this is one of the big problems we face in America right now, is that we're missing the two green bars here, the two missing middle, so to speak, of rail systems. And then what happens when you're missing major forms of transportation, other modes try to make up for it and compensate, and they can't move the kind of numbers that rail can. And so you get aviation overloaded from the upper end and cars and highways overloaded from the lower end. And so really to bring high-speed rail into the mix will balance everything out, make aviation work better, make highways work better, while also providing a very high capacity, completely new mode separate from the existing modes. Next, please. And then also the idea of a complete transportation system includes rail at 3 levels. So it's basically the high speed at the national and regional level, then metros and rail systems like that at the regional, local level, and then streetcars, light rail, and trams at the very local neighborhood and city level. And so to have all 3 of these fully in place, fully integrated with each other, provides a complete rail transportation system, all powered can be powered by renewables. They're all electric. So it's very easy to scale up renewables in parallel with scaling up the rail systems. Next, please. And then finally, the other point of a complete transportation system is directing transit-oriented development type compact walkable development around the stations. And then that becomes the complete community that you need, a walkable community and a rail system working together. And that includes bicycles and multi-level rail, as I said, and together that makes a complete system that's sustainable and also is affordable for millions of people. Next. And then, of course, we have the coronavirus came and disrupted everything. And so we're now looking at, everyone's excited about getting back to normal. Next, please. And the real question is, well, what is normal in transportation? And is that really what we want to return to? Next. This is what our transportation looked like, earlier this year. Many people probably already forgot this because it's been so many months where everything is depressed. But our car system was overloaded and malfunctioning. Our aviation system was overloaded and malfunctioning. And our rail system was from 100 years ago. And that's all the options we have as a country. So next, please. And so what that transportation was delivering us pre-COVID, which we really want to question whether we want to go back to it, is epic congestion daily in every single region, nonstop accidents, injuries, and deaths, constant delays and hassles. It's the #1 cause of climate change. And so it's basically we're paying high costs and getting low mobility. And it's not that we're not spending money. As a nation, between federal and state budgets, we're spending around $300 billion every year expanding the existing modes, yet mobility keeps getting worse because we're leaving out the high capacity rail mode.
Andy, have we lost your audio? Just a second. Yes, you're frozen. So it seems to me we may have to come back to you after you re-log in to the Zoom webinar. I'm going to go to a next panelist to have their presentation be given. We're going to flip this around a little bit as far as perspective is concerned and talk about the jobs and the people that are affected by the jobs that would be created by the National Infrastructure Bank. I would like to introduce to you now Jason Parker, who is the president of the Virginia State Building and Construction Trades Council. And Jason is a part of the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. And we're happy to have you make your presentation here tonight. Jason, you're up next.
Thanks, Jack. I think I've lost control of my video, so I apologize. I'm not sure what's happening with that. I'm going to keep it to a minimum here because there's been a lot of great presentations, and I know we got a lot of other people ahead of me and behind me. I wanted just to make the, here we go, start my video. Look at that. Here I am. So, in the past couple of decades, we've lost 70,000 manufacturers. I believe that this Brent Spence Bridge is a prime example. When you look at the 3% GDP that's on it, that is in the calculus of manufacturers when they're looking for coming back to America and they're looking at our infrastructure. When an employer comes into an area, they look for three things. They look for your quality of your workforce, quality of your education, the quality of your infrastructure. And I think this puts this on full parade, what infrastructure can do or not do for commerce in a place or a geography. And on top of that, I would like to add, and this will, like I said, it's going to be very short for myself, but I'd like to add that this is a national security item. Earlier on this summer, we as the AFL-CIO for the state of Virginia had a conversation with Senator Warner with dealing with COVID-19 when this thing was first getting our first real grip on how bad this situation was. And he said to us in a frank bit of conversation, he said, the fact of the matter is, guys, we're going to have to order the PPE we need to deal with this situation from China. And that for me was pretty enlightening. So, obviously manufacturing is middle-class jobs. You can't have a real economy without manufacturing, but this is a prime example of why infrastructure is paramount to bringing manufacturers back to the United States. And thank you, Jack, for giving me that opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Jason. Next, we're going to have Vance Aries speak, and after that, Erica White. Vance, who's up next, is Director of Governmental Affairs for the Elevator Constructors Union, and we're pleased to have you join us tonight. Vance, your turn.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. Like I said, just to add on to what Jason said, we've had some great speakers tonight. All their comments have been right on. I've been with the elevator constructors for 23 years. My job with the building trades in DC, where I did Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia, which are all old areas. The infrastructure is terrible. Transportation's terrible. If you've sat in DC traffic, the metro system saves us a little bit, but everything around, we're starting to see the bridges crumble around us. My statement would be to look at the history of these programs, especially under FDR, and the success rate of it. One of the speakers earlier referred to it, but they're very successful. They don't add to the deficit. My job for years when I was running the DC building trades was to generate revenue, create jobs, and I'm not careers, construction jobs, apprenticeship programs, working with developers and general contractors all around, with pension programs, with pension monies, with federal monies coming in that supported, like I said, good jobs with Davis-Bacon. These programs, these folks are all taught to have careers. So you're never going to have these folks that get into these processes that build all this infrastructure and add to it. They're self-sufficient. They have their own health care. They have their own retirements. They're self-sustaining or family-sustaining jobs. The PLAs are in the bill, where project labor agreement, which it means everybody's under this misnomer that a project labor agreement is a union job only. I can tell you right now, I executed many project labor agreements with government and private industry, and over 50% of the contractors on these jobs are non-union contractors that sign what we call letters of assent to put their people through these apprenticeship programs, to teach them properly, pay them properly, give them health care, and give them pensions. So if that's not a win-win situation, 25 million jobs at the minimum will be created. The Buy American provisions are fantastic. The 3P, one of the folks earlier was referring to the 3Ps, public-private partnerships. The money going into this, it generates revenue. So it's cyclical. It goes into site, it comes back into the businesses, and it continues, and it's going to repair our failing infrastructure. We've seen that. I heard somebody referring to our internet. I live pretty rural myself now. I actually grew up right outside of DC, worked for 53 years in and around DC, in the DC area. And I can tell you, living in a rural area, I'm limited to one provider, and the Wi-Fi is shoddy. I'm glad you guys, I can be on here now, but it's absolutely ridiculous when I travel the country and I go to these different states and these different areas, the limited communications and Wi-Fi abilities that we have. So I wholeheartedly endorse, since it was my job strictly it's been since 2005 for me to do exactly what this bill does, is create jobs, build infrastructure, and generate revenue. And this does all that. So like I said, I wholeheartedly endorse this. Thank you.
Great, and thank you. And our next speaker is going to continue addressing the topic of broadband, which is critically important to our country, especially given the COVID situation and education. I'm happy to next introduce to you the president of the Communication Workers Local 4319 and the vice president of the Northwest Ohio AFL-CIO, Erica White. Erica, so pleased to have you join us, and you have the floor.
Thank you for having me tonight. And I am going to start off with my first slide. I'm going to add on to pretty much what everybody has said, but add a little spice to it here. So I'm going to start off with sharing with you a little history on broadband. So the independent telephone industry began to develop throughout rural America early in about the 1890s. Both manufacturing and service organizations turned to the rural market. So I'm not sure if any of you were around during that time, but if you were, please see me after this presentation, because I would like to know a little bit more about that. But by 1912, the number of rural telephone systems had grown to more than 3,200. And at its high point in 1927, the rural telephone industry included more than 6,000 mutual systems and other organizations, AKA your great-grandparents' broadband, AKA the rotary phone, okay? Many of us remember that. But it was also during the same time period that these same systems were deteriorating. Okay, why? Many of you have already guessed this, right? Many failed to keep adequate accounts, subscribers relaxed in paying their bills, go figure, right? And there were few maintenance people and little regular upkeep of their facilities. Poor service became the standard in rural America. But in 1930s, America ushered in building back through the New Deal and the establishment of the alphabet agencies. Okay, you know these as, guess what? The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, which was created by the Communications Act of 1934. This act also made the concept of universal service the law of the land here. This cornerstone of telecommunications policy called for making available, so far as possible, to all the people of the United States a rapid, efficient, nationwide, and worldwide wire and radio communication service with adequate facilities at reasonable charges. Okay, I want you to think about that. This was back in 1934, where we are now with this, right? Nothing's changed with that statement. The goal of universal service was and remains today to ensure that all Americans, regardless of where they live, receive quality telephone service at reasonable rates, building back better. If you move to the next slide. Today, that universal service has transcended to disparities in broadband for both rural and urban communities. Nearly 1/4 of the population in rural areas lack access to internet service at the minimum speed requirements be considered broadband, and that's what this slide is. So if you have it, as was just shared, who cares if it's not even considered to be the minimum speed to be broadband? And home broadband access for communities of color continues to lag beyond the rest of the country, according to a recent Pew report. 34% of African Americans and 39% of the Latino community do not have a wired connection. So let me break it down like this. Let me make it real simple for you. We, the telephone company, cannot simply provide high-speed internet right now, today, because if it's not installed, we can't install in households that don't already have fiber optic cable in their neighborhood. So it's not that you just can't have it, you just can't have it because it's not there. No fiber optic for these communities means that teachers cannot connect with children who live there because they cannot access online material and engage their learning. Healthcare workers can't provide telemedicine services to patients who lack broadband or can't get a reliable cell phone connection. The funding for E-rate and low-income broadband benefit included in the HEROES Act is an excellent first step, but we must continue on this work. Congress should pass a robust broadband infrastructure plan with necessary protections for workers to ensure good jobs, to improve our networks and expand connectivity to the millions of families without it. Next slide, please. The economic base for broadband for building infrastructure in America cannot be found on a balance sheet. Why? Because the community benefits outweigh network profits, which are hampering carrier of last resort and the build out of real broadband, aka fiber, to both rural and urban communities alike. So when you see here on the side, we're talking about local business retention, attraction, and growth, neither which we see in urban or rural areas, good paying new local jobs and better quality of life, which are pertinent to both rural and urban areas, and municipal cost reductions and affordable broadband choices. That is why State Representative Lisa Sobecki, with myself and Bob Lynn, who you heard speak earlier, Tom Galloway is on the call, and Mike Friedman, have been helping lead the efforts to pass the National Infrastructure Bill resolution, which was HR 6422 by both our Toledo City Council and signed by our mayor. And just this past Tuesday, I presented to our Lucas County commissioners who also passed that resolution. As we build back better, the time for bold action is now. We can all contribute by engaging our city, our county, and our state representatives. And if you're a union member like myself, and I know that my UAW brother, Tony Toddy, is on tonight and several others, here in Northwest Ohio, we have a motto. You can do better in Toledo. We are building back better by supporting HR 6422, not just for Toledo, but for all communities in Lucas County. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erica.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if my audio has a problem. Is that correct? Nope, sounds better now. All right, thank you. Next, our presenter that we shall have occur and provide their presentation is Dr. Robert Cesario from Missouri, who's the Phelps County Democratic Committee member, and we're very pleased to have the doctor join us tonight. And you're up next, Doctor. You have the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. It's a real pleasure to be here and an honor to be around all these knowledgeable people about all this stuff. I feel like a novice here. I'm a musician and a photographer and an educator, so I don't have near the detailed knowledge of the economics and the engineering aspects of this, although I am recently retired from a primarily engineering school here at Missouri University of Science and Technology. But working as a Democratic committeeman and a state and national delegate for Bernie Sanders through the whole process recently, I've become so aware of the issues confronting the country as a whole, but especially the middle Midwest here in Missouri and the surrounding states of literally crumbling infrastructure. We have issues all over the place. A couple of things that I see as a real benefit to us and to building the economy in Missouri, which needs to improve tremendously, would be this national high-speed rail network that's been talked about so effectively. The line in particular from Chicago to St. Louis, and then the corridor continuing across Missouri from St. Louis to Kansas City. I also like the Great In line I saw on the sign there that goes along the way I often drive when I visit my family in Texas, and that's from St. Louis to Tulsa and on south towards Oklahoma City and into Texas. But I see the jobs that come along with this, family sustaining jobs, as being critical to improving the living conditions and the standard of living for working class folks all across the country, but in particular in rural Missouri. One of the things that's happened in the last 10 years, we've lost something like 14 rural hospitals, 14 hospitals in the state, 9 of whom were rural hospitals, 8 of whom were, of which were acute care hospitals. And when that happens in any rural area, but I know in particular in rural Missouri, it can increase, let's say a farmer who's injured on the job, their time to useful care from a matter of minutes to a matter of hours. And that can be devastating to their health on a long-term basis. It can even cost them their life in some cases. I see the presence of these family sustaining jobs generating enough income and health benefits that will allow these rural hospitals to reopen, not necessarily all of them, but certainly some. And any of them opening will be a great boon to the people living in their area. But that sort of thing is what we need. You know, having been involved in the various campaigns I've been involved in, I've seen social justice as being a real issue. And I see that as being an economic issue as much as anything else. Besides attitudes and all that, we need to literally raise the tide of economic success for everyone. If we increase the incomes so that everyone has the ability to make a living wage, that's going to remove a lot of our problems, I believe. And this is an excellent way of doing that. If you're talking 23 million family sustaining jobs out there, that's an incredible boost to our economy and something that would be great. And I know as someone who's functioned in the arts my whole life, joining the Musicians Union when I was 16 years old, besides being a teacher, believe you me, I know the difference, what happens when you live in a community where people can afford to hire live musicians to play at their weddings and bar mitzvahs and all of that, versus somebody who's got to hire a 2-bit disc jockey to come in, and everything in between. So I see this as just a great boon to the society as a whole. Thank you. That's about all I have to offer at this point.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We're so pleased and happy to have you make your comments and join us this evening. When we had the presentation for Andy Kuntz occur, his connection failed, and he has just a little bit more of his presentation to make. And so if we could, let's flip back over to Andy and let him speak as to the final parts of his presentation. Andy, you can take the floor again if you would like.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Maybe we need better internet, as y'all are saying. If you could put my presentation back up, I was right near the end. I think I had about 3 slides left. Yeah, I think that's right where we were actually. So what I basically had said a moment ago is that we don't really want to go back to what we had. We want to do a new vision for transportation and go forward to a better form of transportation. And that's with a much bigger focus on high-speed rail. Next, please. And so this is kind of what the post-COVID US transportation would look like. Next. So what we did, we just launched this earlier this week, or actually late last week, since we heard that President-elect Biden will be the new president. We decided to get right out ahead and lay out a new plan of action of how the Biden administration could go forward, and working with the infrastructure bank as a way to launch a whole series of new projects. So we basically put out 5 principles how the new high-speed rail program should operate. And we listed, as part of it, we listed 15 high-speed rail projects that should be fast-tracked. And these projects will do multiple things that we need done right now: create millions of new jobs, stimulate the economy, and it will also unify America and bring us back together. We can unify around a common purpose of building a new transportation system. And then at the same time, it's also an immediate and large-scale climate solution. Next. And so the first 5 projects we have listed on there are the 4 of the 5 are already moving forward and are either already under construction or are ready to go to construction. So these are projects that with some quick stimulus money can increase the jobs they're already creating, like California. They can get started, like the Texas project, the Northeast Corridor, the tunnels that were mentioned earlier by Alex Metcalf, and then also launch a couple of other projects. And then next, we also listed an additional 10 projects scattered throughout the country as a way to get pieces of our national system going and to stimulate economies in numerous states. Next. And so when you map it out on a map, this is what it starts to look like, where these first 15 projects are. And if you look, you can see lightly behind the screen there, the full map that we originally launched in 2009 and how these are important key pieces of it. And then you just build it piece by piece. And so a few more missing pieces after this, and you've got lines connecting from Chicago all the way down to Houston and a number of other connections. So next. And then, so basically the idea is these 15 projects shown are important pieces of the national network. As I said, they will deliver immediate jobs across numerous regions of the country, followed by new mobility and employment opportunities when the trains start. They also open up miles and miles of affordable communities and affordable housing for millions of people. They benefit 23 states, both red and blue, urban and rural, and in a variety of diverse regions, and will help America bounce back quickly from the pandemic and the resulting economic depression, and help unify the divided nation over a common infrastructure project that will set the nation up for a prosperous and sustainable future. Next. And I believe this is our final slide. Yes. And thank you so much for your attention. And anyone who's interested, we encourage you to join the association. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. And for our last presenter, I'm pleased and happy to introduce to you an active member of the coalition and also an infrastructure consultant, former director of finance of the Northeast Corridor Amtrak Corporation, Stan Forsythe. Stan, happy to have you join us tonight, and we're anxious to hear about your comments.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate that. And I do have a couple comments. And I don't want to take too much time because we've already been on the webinar now for some time, and we have some other people. But I did want to say a couple things. First off, I don't know if anybody picked up on it, but we spoke very early about two projects that are occurring right now in the country, and that is the Gateway Project, which has the two tunnels in New Jersey, New York, and also the bridge out in Cincinnati. And if you take some of the statements that were made, one equals 3% of the GDP, the other equals 20% of the GDP of the nation, that's almost a quarter of the nation's GDP on two projects that are sorely needed, that should have been done years ago, and now is the time to do them. Another comment that I have is we've talked about many things. I know Senator DiPalma has talked a couple times about the grid and electric transmission. Assemblyman Karabinchuk did the same thing. Every project that we're thinking about, or every project that is on the list for the National Infrastructure Bank, is actually a part of what a total integration may be. Because if we're going to do several thousand water systems across the nation, we're going to have to dig up streets or dig up pieces of property. Well, we only want to dig it up once, and we should be thinking in terms of doing everything simultaneously, so we don't have to keep on doing the same thing over and over again. And I think that's imperative that we integrate the projects. Another thought on some of those projects that deal with water is the fact that the bank can take charge of the situation. If we have 1,000 water distribution systems, or we have some energy distributions that have to be done, there's economies of scale that can be developed by the bank in order to do some of these more economically in a more economic fashion, because you can buy thousands of miles of pipe a lot cheaper than you can for one municipality. And we have to start thinking in terms of that. And Dr. Metcalf mentioned something in his speech where a lot of the projects that we're talking about actually scare people on the political end, and sometimes scare them on the non-political end because they're so large, there's so much money involved with this. And the thing that has impressed me, and I've mentioned it a couple times, is the fact that 60, 70 years ago, no one was really worried about what the cost of a project was. It was simply, we have to do this for the betterment of the country, do it for the betterment of the people, do it for every citizen in the United States. Today, we think, as pointed out, we think about what the price tag is. And we shouldn't be thinking about the price tag, because every one of our speakers tonight has mentioned the fact in one way or another, an infrastructure project is going to supercharge the economy. There's always going to be a return on the investment. So we should not worry about the price of a project. We should be worried about, does it do any good for the nation? Does it help out our citizens? And I can tell you, if we started thinking that way all the way across the board, a lot would be done in this country, and this bank would be able to move forward. This is a citizens bank, and it's needed to get everything done. I appreciate everybody coming in and listening to the webinar. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate your questions. Hope to see you all soon. Thanks a lot, Jack.
Thank you, Stan. Now we're going to go to some of the questions that were asked by our viewers. And the first one is, has the Biden team been approached with regard to a national infrastructure bank? And I'm going to toss this question first to Senator Lou DiPalma, who has some direct and personal knowledge with regard to that question. Senator, your opportunity to answer.
Thank you, Jack. So I'll say the short answer is yes, and because of the work of the coalition, and I am also a delegate, was a delegate to the virtual convention. Because of the work of the coalition, the policy document that was voted on by the thousands of delegates to the convention included in it 4 references to, in fact, infrastructure bank. So the short answer is yes. And somebody say, well, tell me how? Well, in the actual policy document that was passed and approved by the delegates to the convention for Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, an infrastructure bank was included in that.
Thank you very much, Senator. The next question, which is somewhat related to that, I'm going to pass on to Bob Lynn. And the question specifically is, how do you get HR 6422 passed through Congress next year? Bob, would you like to take a shot at answering that question?
Sure. The real challenge that we have actually begins right now. We need to get started by reaching out. The elections have been decided all the way throughout this nation. No matter what the current president says, Joe Biden's going to be the next president of the United States. We also know most of the House seats, and we also know who the senators are going to be. The bill is getting ready to get reintroduced by Congressman Danny Davis. We are looking to continue to be able to get more co-sponsors. And the best way to be able to do that was something that Erica touched on a little bit, and they've been doing up in Detroit too. It's about starting out local, talking to your local congressperson to be able to get on, but it's about talking to your city council. It's about getting the community on board to be able to make a difference, because if you can get them on board, then they get to talk to the congressman or congresswoman. And by doing that, then they can start to follow up and be able to put a little bit more pressure on it. For example, Southeast Michigan was able, by going and talking to the whole block of municipalities in and around Detroit, Michigan, they were able to get Debbie Dingell, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, to sign on as a co-sponsor. So my advice, and I strongly encourage, is if you think this is important, it's about doing the little steps. All the little steps along the way make a big tidal wave. But if we don't start doing the little steps and we just want the big steps, they'll never come. I'm a firm believer that you have to build the parade. Once the parade's built, the politicians will run to the front. And that's what our job is right now, is to build that parade and move things forward. So that's it.
Great. Thank you. Next, we're going to go and have Jason, Anita, and Erica take a shot at answering those questions too. Their choice. So Jason, you're up first. And well, then Erica, why don't we have you take a shot at the policy questions of how to have the National Infrastructure Bank legislation passed and promoted in a Biden administration. Thank you.
Well, I want to first start off, which I think most people have forgotten about, is that when we look at his transition teams, a lot of them, if you are a union, wherever you are in a union, if you're an officer or if you're just a normal union member listening in tonight, we already have people in place already that you can be reaching out to within your union that are members of those transition teams. We also, another way to start off, if you're not in your union or if you're looking at around in your community, you always want to start off with your city council. Who is your house rep? Where are you at city? Where is your city council? Who are those? Show up to the meeting, start to talk. You want to start going and talking to your county commissioners. You want to think about not just the rural areas, you want to think about the urban areas and spreading out. You also want to be reaching out also and finding other people on this call. So a lot of us are here that are also involved in how to build that structure. I know Jack is on, you can reach out to Jack or Stu or Senator DiPalma. A lot of us, we're just real people and we're all on the same page. So building that coalition together. So one of my brothers are on from Cleveland from CWA. So inviting people onto the call and building that structure out. So we can't just have it, as Bob was saying, I just can't think of Toledo. Now I've got to think about building east and west of Toledo. How do we build north and south? Because as it was shown, we want to make tracks across the country and not just stop at one place. So it's all about reaching out. And here it is. And this is the easiest thing. Politicians like numbers. I'm sorry for all our politicians we have on there. They're probably like, I do, you do. They like numbers, just like corporations. The bottom line here is that we're not creating any new debt. We're building jobs. We're building an economic base for communities. If you can speak that, if you can say that, you can talk to anybody and they're going to listen. So I just want to let you know that you can do this. We're here to support you, and it's not as hard as you think. People are looking for solutions and they're ready to move forward.
Thank you, Erica. Next, let's have Anita be provided an opportunity to respond to those questions. Anita, thank you.
Yeah, I just like to, pile on what Erica said. I mean, I think it's important to reach out to council members. City council is on board with this. So, I mean, we have to move to other counties around. I mean, Allegheny County is where Pittsburgh is, but we have Westmoreland, we have Erie. So there's a lot of opportunities. But just to get, the grassroots movement is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. And one of the comments that I would just like to add, oh, wait a second, Vance, I think wants to make a statement too with regard to this issue. Vance, go ahead, you have the floor, thanks.
Yeah, and just along with what the folks said, and as a labor movement, we do it with our membership, of course, but as a constituent, that's one thing we always encourage folks to do is get more involved and understand, like you said, a council member level or a mayor or anybody moving on up, and your state level folks, your House of Rep or state Congress folks and your senators are huge players, and they actually have constituencies like the council members do, and they're more directed. So if you can get involved and get those folks on board who actually go to the general assemblies to move stuff forward and deal with the governors and all the state level officials. Remember, there's only 50 governors in the United States of America. There's tons and tons of everything else. But if you can get a movement toward a governor and then a governor to speak towards the state legislators and the federal legislators in the state, and then of course you move it on up and go through like that. So that's kind of what we do. Where, like you said, it's a grassroots movement. So the constituents can go to each level. But remember, most politicians start as baby politicians and they move their way up. So they've sat in those seats directly working with the folks at the council levels and then move their way on up to the higher levels. So they still respect and work with those folks at those levels because they know where they come from.
Thank you, Vance. One final question we're going to toss to Alphecca and ask her one of the questions that we have. What are the similarities and the differences between the National Infrastructure Bank and the Federal Reserve, and who would administrate the building projects? If you could address those two questions, Alphecca, briefly, if you would, and we'll then get ready to wrap everything up. So Alphecca, your turn.
Thanks very much, Jack. Okay, the Federal Reserve is our central bank, of course, and mostly they look at economic policy, how much money do we print, and the financial health of commercial banks. And they're not so much into the business of building infrastructure, frankly. The same is sort of true of the federal government. We have a budget. We've been trying to finance infrastructure through the budget, but it doesn't last in a consistent manner over time so that it's sustainable. Infrastructure needs 10-year planning, and it's just not possible under federal budgets where you have changes in political parties and ups and downs in the economy that either push spending forward or get the spending cut back. We need a consistent level of spending and attention paid to infrastructure development, and that's what this independent public bank can provide. Jack, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Alphecca. One final question that I want to proffer as far as the panelists are concerned and those that are viewing our presentation. A national infrastructure bank addresses and finances our national infrastructure. That is not a blue or a red state issue. This is a bipartisan challenge that our country must face. And if we are going to succeed, we're going to have to join together in order to address these economic problems. Those problems go beyond partisanship. And these economic development infrastructure proposals straddle both red and yellow states and also address rural and urban needs. For our rural communities, the broadband, water projects, transportation necessities are critical as far as their needs are concerned, along with farming challenges that this bank will also assist in addressing. Our urban needs as far as New York City and other urban areas also need to have their critical infrastructure needs funded. So the strategy behind having this legislation passed is to have everybody get a piece of the pie. There's no other way that this thing's going to get done without everybody having a place at the table. That's what we propose, and we think that it makes common sense, no matter what your party identification is, that this idea of a national infrastructure bank must go through for the good of the country and for the needs that our economy has and our citizens need as far as employment is concerned. I'm going to wrap things up with our presentation tonight and say that we thank you all for joining us. We will be having another webinar sometime in December. I think it might be December 10th with a topic to be disseminated to you. And we thank you for joining us and wish you a wonderful evening. Take care.